Okay, we are officially live on YouTube, waiting for one person to join. Start in a few minutes. Okay, we are officially live on YouTube, waiting for Okay, it is 1, so we can start. So for all of you joining us on YouTube, we're gonna start with some introductions. So I'll start with me. I am Alejandra Flores. I'm the president of the International Student Council. I will be moderating the meeting today. And then I'm just gonna ask the panelists to please introduce yourselves. Megan, will you go first?
Hi everyone, my name is Megan, but I prefer Megs. I was an Irish exchange student from South Africa, and I'm now currently studying my first year towards becoming a teacher.
Should I go next? My name is Dorothy Masinde. I am an associate teaching professor at Iowa State University in the Global Resource Systems major. I also serve as an associate director for nutrition education programs in the Center for Sustainable Rural Livelihoods, where we work in Uganda on nutrition issues. And I'm originally from Kenya, but I've been living in Uganda for so long now, I consider myself more Ugandan than Kenyan. And I live here in Iowa, in Enzayo.
Valerie, would you go next? Valeria, sorry.
Yes, okay. My name is Valeria Volkogonova, or Valerie. I'm from Minsk, Belarus, and I also was Irish student 3 years ago. Yeah, and I work in civil society organization, non-governmental organization in Belarus.
I think you're muted.
I am Shamata, and I am from Tanzania, and I was also an Irish student. And currently, I work with an NGO rescuing girls from rural areas for education.
All right, well, first of all, thank you all of you panelists for being here. I'm very excited to ask you some questions. So I will start, I guess, just by noting that all of you have done wonderful things. I'm very happy to be able to talk to you today. And for everyone tuning in, you can ask questions in the chat and we will get to them later on. So my first question for all of you, whoever wants to answer can go ahead. What is your primary focus in your career, in your profession, in your field that you are in right now, and why did you choose it?
I'll go first. As I said before, I'm in my first year of studying towards becoming a teacher, and it's a really exciting career path that I think I've chosen because I just really feel that obviously our future is in the hands of our youth, and to be a small part in helping to shape our youth and to grow them to be the leaders is a very exciting prospect for me. And that's why I'm on this journey, I'm on this path towards becoming a teacher. And I'm really excited for that path.
Okay, I can continue. Okay, more than 7 years I work and I volunteer for NGOs, and these NGOs, civil society organizations, are really my professional passion. But it wasn't always like that, because at the university I studied chemistry with major in electrochemistry. But I also was interested in the history, for example, in the history of the Great Terror of Stalin's times and the history of the Second World War. And during my students' years, I visited a conference. It was commemorating victims of Nazi persecution. And after that, I joined as a volunteer for their NGO that work with former slave workers and with former victims of concentration camps of the Second World War. And on this example, I understood that CSOs are really cool because, you know, they solve problems that no one else solves, and they speak about these problems. And that's why I made a CSO capacity building and CSO development in Belarus my profession. And only when I was an Irish exchange student, we visited the Girl in Science initiative in Des Moines. And I was so astonished because it was first time in my life when I regretted a little bit that I'm not a chemist now, that I don't do chemistry, because they have so cool programs. They empower women, they empower young girls to be great in science, in technology, in engineering. And in Belarus, in my university, we have never discussed any gender problems, and I never saw women like professors or deans or rectors. I saw women as office workers, as laboratory assistants, as teachers. That's why now I don't regret that I choose to defend our rights, women's rights, because first we need to defend our rights, and later no young girl will regret that she can, will have no doubt that she can be a great scientist.
Oh, I can go next. So my primary focus during my university years, I majored in geography and environment, and simply because I saw a lot of problem facing women and children, and I thought maybe it's because of the environment we lived in, and I was focusing on mainly agriculture and especially livestock and climate change. But then after graduating, I saw I chose a different path. I've been volunteering ever since I graduated, almost 4 years ago, in different NGOs, serving street children, especially girls, and communities, especially rural areas, women in rural areas. And why did I choose that career? Is because well, my profession still serve women, but I wanted to get as quick as possible through to them. And the only way I could do that was by volunteering and taking part in different part of sectors and helping women to realize who they are and being able to rescue girls and sending them to school. It has been such a rewarding career I've chosen. So I really, really like what I've chosen so far.
So I'm smiling because I think I'm a different generation from you guys, because when I started working, gender or women issues were not issues. Whatever we were going through was basically a norm. the first year of my school, my first year of working was the year when we had the Beijing conference, women conference. I leave you to guess when that was. It's in the history books you guys read. And so before then, I found myself in international development. As a young girl, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know what career was. I was in high school and we were being told, select a college. And I'm like, where do I go? And all I remember was the only role models I had then, my sister was my role model, but she was still in high school, was I had about these cousins I had never met that were in these very nice colleges in Kenya that taught agriculture. And so I remembered the names and I quickly filled those names. I had no idea about agriculture. I'll tell you honestly, I grew up in a city, a tourist city called Mombasa in Kenya. I didn't even know how to hold a hoe. And here I was saying I'm going into agriculture. When I got to college, I learned about agriculture, I learned about extension, and realized, wait a minute, these people are talking about helping people improve themselves. And at that point, I really wanted to do something to help other people in the world and make a difference. This past week, I was reminded of that because at that time we had a foster father. My dad died when I was like 13. And someone else took in my family. Sadly, this person passed away last week. And he took care of us, raised us, wasn't related to us. And from that day, I said, I want to be like him. I want to make a difference in people's life. And so I got to college and I realized I've reached a point where this career is going to lead me to a situation where I'm going to be helping people. And so I was like, wait a minute, I think I found my passion. But I'll be honest, I didn't know much about what this passion was. When I went to grad school and I studied here in the US at Cornell, we had a course called Gender and Development. And I said, I want to learn more. And I did my senior project or dissertation on gender training. And that's when I started realizing, guess what, Dorothy, what you have is not the norm. There's a lot you need to do to help people who are like you in terms of your gender. That's when I decided I'm going to fight for women and I'll do it with all my passion. And then I realized it's not just women, but they're also kids. And so it's been 38 years since I chose to go into international development. I'm still growing. Finally, I'm focusing more on community nutrition. And as I said, I'm still growing because at this age, which is very, very many years on, I've gone back to school. I'm completing a master's of public health in nutrition just to enhance my skills because I think I still have a lot to offer to the field of international development, working with women and children, especially those suffering from malnutrition.
Wonderful. So my next question is, what is the status of women's rights in the country that you are currently living and working in?
So in South Africa, I guess I'll go first again. In South Africa, I think we have made quite huge leaps and bounds with regards to our women's rights, as in law and government. We have the same rights as men. We have the same opportunities. I'm able to go through high school and go to university and choose what I want to study. And I have my rights to vote. And I know that's not always the same in many other countries. And so I do believe South Africa has given us those opportunities with regards to our law and our government. But one challenge that we do face in South Africa is definitely our old traditions and cultures. And I'm not saying all traditions and cultures are bad. Those are our heritage, that's our history. But there are some old traditions that still oppress women in South Africa. You'll still find arranged marriages, and you'll still find families putting a lot more emphasis on their son's education rather than their daughter's education. So our government has given us these opportunities and these rights, but it's very difficult for women sometimes to take hold of those opportunities because of these old traditions and these old ways of thinking. But with that being said, I do believe that our youth and our women are finally stepping away from those old traditions. And thanks to platforms such as social media and the internet, they're speaking up, and they're just moving away from that and taking those opportunities. And you'll find women in every career field. You'll find women doctors and women lawyers, and it's exciting to see that progress. And we still have a lot more to go in South Africa. But I feel that if you were to ask me that question in a few years' time, the answer would be very different.
I'll go next. So I'm a person that I don't know which country I live in. So I live here in the US, I'm from Kenya, and I work in Uganda almost all summers for the past almost 20 years, and except last year and this year maybe. But what I'll do is I'll focus more on Uganda because that is where we are working. And that's where I'll say I've focused a lot of my career for the past several years. The Uganda situation in terms of gender, I would say it's a case of mixed reaction. Uganda has made great strides. First and foremost, they actually have a Ministry of Gender. We have Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development. So it's the responsibility of this ministry to make sure that gender is integrated in all sectors of the country. That is, they work with different departments or ministry in order to include gender in their work or in their planning, in their budgets, and so on. So gender is very important. Our gender mainstreaming is very important in Uganda. Women empowerment is the other area that Uganda is really working hard on. And what they have done, they have actually ratified international policies like the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Platform of Action, which, as I said, the Beijing conference was held in 1985 when I was just starting my career. They've also fully subscribed to the 5th Sustainable Development Goal on gender equality and women empowerment. Having said that, some of the achievements include the issue of affirmative action. Uganda is one of the East African countries that has actually introduced or embraced the idea of affirmative action, such that 25% of the cabinet is female. They have 33% of their state ministers, who are kind of like assistant ministers for these other countries, are female also, and their Speaker of Parliament, once again, she was elected to be the Speaker of Parliament for Uganda, is female. Those are major achievements, especially when I compare to my own country of Kenya. However, this ministry only receives less than 1% of the country's budget. So you can imagine that again is a form of a hindrance to them implementing the activities. Now, when you look at the positive things, or include other positive things, is the issue of women attending antenatal clinic. The number is put at 97% of the women at least attend at least one session of antenatal clinic. We have about 74% of women in the country giving birth with assistance from a professional. However, this is not the story in the rural areas. The rural areas are very different. In Uganda, women actually, this is sad, they're still being categorized together with people with disabilities, vulnerable and orphan children as an excluded category. So you can imagine we are not just part of the other human beings, but we are considered as a special category. Women, in terms of literacy level, we are behind. The women literacy is 70% in Uganda compared to 78% of men. We have a lot of gender-based violence. That's something that is just major. Women lack resources, access to resources for production, especially in the field of agriculture, where they provide 70% of the labor and only control 22% of the income. So you see that things are not so rosy. We work in a rural district of Uganda in the eastern part of the country. And in these areas, we were affected by the COVID-19. When the lockdown came in, my program provides improved nutrition training and also other complementary services like family planning through the Ministry of Health and vaccination or immunizations for children. We had to stop that. So what's happening? There's an escalation of gender-based violence among women, rural women, especially even in the city. That's a problem. There's reemergence of childhood illnesses among these groups because immunizations went down significantly, and we're still worried on how that's going to pan out. Uganda is still facing issues of infectious diseases, and they have to contend with the problem of non-communicable diseases. Overweight and obesity is beginning to be a big problem, especially in the cities. We also have problems of hypertension, different types of cancers, and all sorts of non-communicable diseases, and in addition to what we are facing with infectious diseases. What we call triple burden of malnutrition, undernutrition is still a problem. Overnutrition and its associated problems is becoming an issue. And then micronutrient deficiency is another issue. We are worried about what's going to happen with HIV/AIDS because during lockdown, people are not able to access their ARTs. And so that is another area we're going to look at and wonder what's going to happen. So women who are delivering children, who deliver children without assistance, and what's happening to those kids is another issue. So things were getting better. They were bad, they were getting better. But with COVID, we have no idea what's going to happen. So that's where how I would describe the situation in Uganda.
So in Tanzania, it's both. It has really progressed over the years. I would definitely say it is a lot way different when you look in Tanzania status from year back and currently. Women have been given many opportunities. Some of them, of course. Especially, you can see a big difference in the cities. When it comes to women hold different positions. You can find them in as teachers, but also in leadership positions. Also, the Tanzanian government have really been forthcoming with women's rights and women's been given chances. We have spaces that normally the government will choose women to hold, and the government has been also emphasizing somehow on how women can stand, but also be given the rights they deserve to stand on. And in different platforms, they have been encouraged, and even sometimes scholarships has been more favored to some students, especially girls, just to improve the status of women and being shown they can. And also, women have the increase in the number of women who went to school, especially back in 2019. That's the last that I saw, but it has improved a lot compared to the past few years. But also the women themselves, there is such a big realization, especially women in town and those who at least access education to some levels. There's a big realization of who they are and wanting to fight for their own rights. So it's such an improvement. To me, I think that's a bit of what the improvement has been shown. But even then, while we have women holding big position in the government, big position in the other sectors like health, environment, and so forth, there is still such a big gender parity gaps when it comes to really the reality of seeing a full number of women holding position and the rest of the women. When it comes especially to rural areas, which is the biggest percent of the population in Tanzania, of course, women really show such a big disparity in gender quality. When it comes to education, especially, women in the rural areas are really not given a chance to access education. It's always a fight for a girl to be able to go to school. And even now that there's a lot of challenges, especially with the coronavirus, there is a lot of girls being abused and not being able to access education at all. And why is that? Because one of the statements that's really affecting a lot of girls is that when a girl gets pregnant here in Tanzania, they cannot go back to school. If they are in high school or secondary or primary, they cannot go back to school unless they go to private schools, or they're not really, there's no statement that supports them. So during this lockdown and the coronavirus and the entire last year, it has been such an uproar for a lot of girls who lost chances to education. Because if the community does not support education, of course, girls are in a much more bigger risk. When it comes to economic, women really in Tanzania are not holding such a recommendable position in having property or in owning property in being same or even just at least a recommended percentage when it comes to economic. Because women most of the time, though they are the one who work a lot, still they provide. I mean, they work in agriculture a lot, and that's what in the Tanzania, that's the backbone of Tanzania. But though they work a lot, they still own almost nothing. When you go to rural areas, because of the cultures, the norms, and the upbringing of the entire society, women almost own nothing when it comes to that. And because of that, they normally lack voice at all. And so, though there's progress, there's also such a big gap to seeing the effectiveness of such a progress set by the government or set by other NGOs who are trying to work hard for women's rights. And one more thing is that when it comes to rural areas and women in town, there's just a big difference because in the rural areas, women are still very abused, and though even those women who live again in towns and who works in high position is sometimes are also abused. Why? Because men or like the society has such a point of view of being cultural, which is really a good thing because that's our history, and it is great to have history. But that culture, some of that culture, some of those norms set by the society still oppresses women, even in high position, and sometimes they don't have a say because when you have a say, when you have a voice, sometimes you lose the position you are in. And to keep that position, that means like they are being silenced and being abused within. And so yes, in Tanzania for sure there is such a progress, but also there's a big, huge gender parity in between men and women.
Thank you, colleagues, for your really interesting description of the situation in different countries. I will continue describing what's going on in Belarus. Belarus is the Eastern European country situated between Poland, Latvia, Ukraine, Russia, and Lithuania. And maybe last year you have heard about rigged presidential elections by Alexander Lukashenko, who are like 26 years runs the country and doesn't want to leave his position. And we are now right in the middle of the political and economic crisis. But I checked, preparing for this presentation, I checked the Global Gender Gap Report 2020, and I saw Belarus on the 29th place of 153 countries, with the United States being on 53rd place, for example. But does it mean that we in Belarus are better in promoting gender equality than the United States? Or does it mean that we in Belarus reached gender equality? But I would say no. And the reasons for this high rating, high place in the rating, I can mention the following. For example, in Belarus, more women than men enroll in the universities and get higher education, but women do this because they face barriers on the labor market, and that's why women put more effort in their education. But when girls enter universities, as a rule, they choose specialities like social protection or public catering or social scientists or teaching, and these positions are not really high paid, and women are 2.5 times less paid than men, and they less likely to take leadership positions. And for example, among male employees, we have 41% of managers, and among female employees, we have only 17% of managers. And also interesting fact that women hold about 30% of seats in the Belarusian parliament, because we have these quotes for women. But in the reality, Belarusian parliament decides nothing, because only President Lukashenko decides everything in the country, and this 30% of the seats in the parliament, just forget about them. And among almost 30 ministers, we have only one woman, 29 men, one woman, and also chairpersons of all the main governmental committees, of regional committees, deputies, they also men. Belarusian women earn less than men, even if they hold the same position. And moreover, this gender wage gap, it became more, for example, if we compare 2001 and 2017, in 2017, it became more than it was 20 years ago. And women, as I already mentioned, so women work in public sector, in healthcare, in education, and culture, arts, and in Belarus, these works are not highly paid. And of course, domestic violence also a problem in Belarus, and every third woman experienced domestic violence, gender-based violence in her family. And according to surveys, every fifth guy, every fifth man in Belarus considers it's normal to hit a woman. But what can we say if the president of Belarus, the former president, as we call him now, he has rejected the bill that criminalizes domestic violence. And during his press conference 2 years ago, he said that we don't need this law, and it's okay, you could belt your children sometimes. And of course, we still have a lot to do in Belarus, especially when your president treats the country as the abuser treats his wife. And when he says that I will not give this country to anyone else.
Yeah, thank you all. This is a very good demonstration of how women's rights are different throughout the world. So now kind of to go on the other side of it, what would you guys say is universal in how women are treated around the world, and what is the biggest challenge that women face?
I think I'll go fast this one, and I hope I'll go through it very fast. If, there's a way you can look at that in more of a subjective way. Or when you look at women in the world, personally, I still feel all women in the world still need a lot done for them. Yes, we are at a point where in some countries, the boy child is beginning to suffer because he's being left behind. And when I say a boy child, I mean even the men. When you look at, if a man loses a job, I'll talk about Nairobi, Kenya. If you are a man and you lose your job, to get a job is going to be very hard, because the women have proved themselves. And because they have proved themselves, people who worry about organization, institutions that worry about their bottom line, that's their profit, they're always willing to hire women, because women work almost twice as hard as the men, and they're paid almost half what the men are being paid. So the issue that one of our panelists presented about women earning less is almost a universal problem. I work and live in the US, and at first when I was coming, I was blindly thinking, oh, things are better in the US. No, even here in the US, women are earning less. And I've heard even from my friends at ISU that, oh, I think we are not being treated fairly. I've heard from different sources. And it doesn't mean I'm one of them, but I still believe women are not being treated fairly. Now, when it comes to generally in the world, the developed part of the world, women are more empowered. Maybe women have more equality than women in developing countries. Women, and most of the time it's because they're also financially more empowered. However, when you compare women, even the developed part of the world, to men in those countries, we are still not yet doing well. Let's look at things like maternal mortality rates. In Africa, in Uganda, we are at about 336 deaths at every 10,000 births. Surely, why should we continue losing these women? US is no better. Among developed countries, sadly, the US ranks with the worst numbers at 17 for every 10,000 women, live births, I mean. And it's worse for Black women at 37. And I believe when you start looking at economic status, it is worse. So I would say we are still not where we should be. Women are still not being treated fairly in comparison to men and in comparison to where they are. One issue I'd like to raise before I stop is about migration. We are seeing a lot of migration from different parts of the world. And someone mentioned culture. When we move from where we're coming from, as we can say, you can get Dorothy out of Kenya, but you will not get the Kenyan out of Dorothy. I arrived here last night, I ate my local ugali, which is a Kenyan dish, with local vegetables cooked the Kenyan way. So when I bring that cooking culture, I am also bringing my other culture. I was watching a video on BBC about breast ironing, which is a culture from West Africa, a country in West Africa. And these are girls suffering this in the UK. Excuse me, who says women in the UK are better than women in Africa? We need to dig deeper than what we say. Yes, they are more financially empowered, and so you tend to have a voice there. And so that's another issue. There are people who might talk for you. We have more, maybe there are policies that are in place to help you. But as Valeria said, leave those policies alone. They are there on paper, but in practice is a different story.
Yeah, that is all. A short remark. I just wanted to say that I agree with you. And if we go back to this global gender gap report, even we see in Iceland taking the first place, the index of Iceland will be 0.8 something. It means that if we take the rights and possibilities that men have as one, women have only 0.8 of these possibilities and everything.
When you look at the world and when you look at the world records and just trying to look at the reality about women all over the world, there is such a big similarities that all women actually worldwide, every single country has its own things that are really suppressing women to be who they are or to develop their maximum. Be it like work, be it be it violence, and most of those things you will find that most in most of the African countries they will call it culture. That's for sure. What I tried. I was asking friends and talking to friends from African countries, and most of African countries, almost every single country, there is people who are suffering, especially women, just because of culture. And when you look at the developed countries, you'll find that it's not just the culture because it is still the same thing, whether they call it culture or they call it anything else. But you'll find the similarities that women are still oppressed, women are still abused in every single way, and even shockingly that most of them go through the same thing. And when it comes to voicing out, all over the world, women are rising they can fight for their own rights, they can fight for their own freedom. And that's something that really is encouraging currently, because when you look at every single country, there's a woman, almost in every single country trying to fight for women's rights. And there is no any country that really has reached its potentiality of being an equality country and gender equality country. There is none. And when you look at and it is not just because some countries are developed and some are less developed, because as someone said before, there is such a parity between developing countries and developing countries, but still you can see the gaps between everything that they do. That it is still such a big phenomenon that people are still suffering, women are still suffering, girls are still suffering, children are still suffering, especially girl child. And but as time goes, although most of the places women are being denied education, which is mostly the keys and resources also are being denied resources, which also another key to their own freedom. But there's an encouragement that the level of women or the number of women is increasing yearly. It's increasing every single moment. The number of women who are fighting, who are grabbing what they must, is increasing. And that's what I realized worldwide, such a similarity and such an encouragement, although it is also discouraging that the entire world has still a long way to go to realize women are as equal as men.
Yeah, so I think everyone touched on like pretty much a lot of the similarities, and definitely the physical vulnerability that a lot of women feel all over the world. And you see that in the high rates of domestic violence and the high rates of rape in every single country, that people have to deal with that. And another challenge that I think all women face is freedom of choice. We were talking about being denied education, and some countries have maybe law that you denies your education, or even in a country that you can still go to university or school. There's still that pressure from society that women feel that they can't go into certain careers. And I believe that that is a real struggle that women face all over the world. It may look different, but we all struggle with that freedom of choice, I feel. And women also definitely feel that struggle with physical vulnerability.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So we have about 5 minutes before we start answering questions from the audience here. So last question, if you could try to answer it in about a minute or so. What are you doing personally to combat the mistreatment of women?
Oh, so personally, I have been advocating women's rights, and I've been doing this mainly in rural areas where none of these really is reached to them because of the nature of the environment they live in. And so women, most of the women in rural areas even doesn't really know that they have the right to have freedom to have a freedom to own anything, to have freedom to live away from violence and the abuse they go through. And so the first thing I realized it was that if I can only uh, help them realize who they are, or like realize they can have all that freedom, they can have freedom of choice, they can live in a gender equal world, then maybe they can fight for their own rights as well. The second thing I've been doing also is trying to focus on helping girls to attain education, to access education, especially in communities where girls are still considered only have to be mothers and doesn't have to go to school. And I have been advocating that and helping the community realize the importance of a girls being educated, being given the same chances as a man being given um, to go to school. And the other thing I've been doing this also in and visiting schools personally and encouraging students, especially girls, that they can study the same subjects, and they can study even science subject, and they can perform as much and as well as boys can. So generally trying to encourage the students, but also trying to encourage the society by teaching them the women's right, and also men, including men in this seminar, so they can realize that violence, especially, or denying girls education, or denying women access to properties ownership, um, isn't a right thing to do, and what are the alternatives they can do to improve such a society, and how attaining equality, women's equality, and men working together as one, how can that improve their status, but also how can that improve the society and bring in the harmony that they can live together in it.
I'll just quickly mention what we do in Uganda. So I'm privileged to work with a program Iowa State University has in Uganda. That's how I came here. And in our program, what we are focusing on, we're focusing on keep making the women become economically or financially empowered. Because with the years I've worked there, all the women who become empowered, they actually draw respect, they have a voice, they can actually challenge those men, and because of that, financial support. So like Shamata, girl education is one of them. We provide health and nutrition programs because that's a starting point to have a smart girl. First 1,000 days is our focus. We provide nutrition. We provide health services so that women can have a say about their bodies. This one I'm going to say it's not just the US, Africa, even in the US, who are making decisions about reproductive health for women. They're men. Why are you making rules for games you do not play? Excuse me. We need to get in those positions where we can help influence decisions. The men should let us also enjoy those powers and make decisions on our health. And that's what I tell my girls and women in Uganda. Get into leadership position. You will make a difference in the life of women.
In Belarus, we do non-formal educational programs, and we empower women to be leaders, to be the leaders of their local communities, to be the leaders of their, for example, to run their own small businesses, especially in rural areas. We also promote women expertise, because I still see these men panels where, you know, all experts are only men, so we empower women to promote their expertise and communicate their results, and also not forget about themselves, and we help them to care about themselves and not afraid to be this kind of women they want to be.
Yeah, so in this teaching career, I'm just really excited to be able to help teach young girls to speak up, to have a voice, to have an opinion, and at the same time to teach young boys that women are their equal and how to treat them right, and that we are all equal. And I believe I'm really excited to do that in my career path.
Okay, thank you all. So we're going to move on to the questions, Q&A. For those listening in, you can go ahead, start typing questions, and we will get to as many as we can. So just because of the time, I'll ask two of you to talk, and then we'll have to move on just because there's quite a few questions here. So the first one is, what can women do to support each other from all over the world to continue fighting for women's rights?
I believe as women, we just need to support one another, support one another's choices and respect each other's choices. The woman who chooses to be a wife and have children is as empowered as the woman who chooses to be the CEO of a business, because they've both been that woman's choice. So just respecting each other and encouraging each other's choices and being an ear to other women. It's always good to listen to one another's struggles and encourage one another.
I'm responding in writing, so maybe someone else can go for that.
Okay. Okay, I believe that also we have not many role models of great women. That's why we also need to be these role models for other girls and women. And for example, we can create global communities to support each other. I am personally I am remarkable initiative facilitator. It's an initiative from Google, and it has over 7,000 facilitators all over the world, and it helps women to promote their expertise and not afraid to speak about their success. And that's why I run these workshops in Belarus, but it's great to be the part of a global movement and to understand that I am not the only facilitator, but 7,000 colleagues around the globe.
Okay, so next question here. I see that we have one answer here, but I would like to just put it out to the group. So a member would like to know, what can American women in specific learn from feminists and women's rights activists in your cultures and countries?
I can start because I think American women can learn from our political leaders from the last year, because all the men who ran for presidential campaign, they were arrested and put in jail, and the wife of one of their candidates on presidential post, he was Sergei Tikhanovsky, he was arrested, and his wife Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, she went instead of him for this presidential campaign, and actually she became the president of Belarus. Even Lukashenko doesn't admit it. So now she's the president, and she had to leave the country because it wasn't safe for her to stay in the country, but now she's really great. She was just a teacher of English, and she was the housewife for many years, raising children, doing some housework, and now she became really president, and people support her as our president. And it's really like a story from some movie when you see her pass from in May. Year ago she was just, oh, I'm housewife, don't ask me any questions, and now she speaks really like the democratic leader of the whole country.
Dr. Masinde, if you wouldn't mind just recapping what you answered on the text for those who are listening in on YouTube, I think it was a very good point.
Yeah, I was just saying that when I look at what goes on in the US versus what's going on in our countries, for us, we've been made aware, or we've lived the fact that women are still disadvantaged. And we are, as women who are enlightened, we actually go to the streets because that's the only way people can listen to us. We still go to the street. A few years ago, there were all these issues about the way women dress, that they're encouraging sexual harassment. And we had this movement that we had in Kenya that's called My Dress, My Choice. And other things that we find, we've been having demonstrations against female genital mutilations, so many things. And yet we see, like in the US, when I read from history and when I was learning my gender classes, people used to go to the street to demonstrate for rights to vote, rights for this, rights for this. And when they achieved what they achieved, it's like people thought, oh, we are doing fine, we don't need to go and continue. And last year we saw, the past few years, we've seen people coming out, these movements like Me Too. People are able to talk, yet these people are quiet because they didn't have the forum. So what I need to tell them is, we need people to actually go out there. Let's make noise. You might not see me because I think everybody else will run when the police come and I'll be the last. So avoid being there. But otherwise, people need to go in the street. People need to make more noise. because in terms of equality here, even here in the US, every day we switch on the TV, social media everywhere, women start talking about things that happened long ago. Why are you talking about them now? Why didn't you take? I was shocked to learn women in military here, they suffer. Why are they suffering in silence? Because the men are so believing that, oh, the women are okay with the way things are. Please go back to the streets and talk and create awareness and disturb. Yelling helps, and we are girls. We are good at that. You know, that's what makes you a girl. Whichever type of a girl, if you don't know how to yell, you need to learn, because if we don't yell, nobody is going to listen or do stuff for us.
Amazing. So another question here is, what is one project that you have worked on regarding women's rights that you are most proud of?
Can I go for that one? Because I was just dying to talk about that. You see, when people talk about women's rights, people always think in terms of equality. And when they talk about equality, they talk about in terms of maybe the way we are being treated, being given fairness in terms of getting jobs and such things. But there's just more to that. As I said, the capitals or resources that position us where we are social capital, our political capital, cultural capitals, and the financial capital. Social capital is very important because it creates the linkage, the connections that you need. But the one that brings about the difference is the financial capital. Look at all the rich women. They can say whatever they want to say and people will listen. So my pride is my project in Uganda, especially the income generation, where we actually make just baskets or we make masks or we do that. But those women, talk to them, you'll be amazed. These are women who used to be beaten. These are women whose husband took their little money, went and married new wives. They say, you know what, I told him to go to hell because I can take care of myself. And now he's home, he's helping me. He actually brings me to the crafts meeting so that I can make the basket. He helps me take the kids to hospital. This woman, all she needed is to bring home her earnings from the basket. So I am very proud of that. I might not have made noise in the street, I might not have influenced a policy, but making that woman financially, economically empowered has made a difference. And guess what? There's so many of them.
Wow, that really that's really great. So personally, one of the projects I did and I'm really proud of was back in 2019. I did a seminar on women's rights, advocating women's rights, and the results that came after was what I really am proud of. That most of the students attended, most of the women who attended that workshop, they are now advocating for women's rights. They are advocating for chances for other girls to go to school. They are advocating for women against the women's abuse, especially violence at homes. And I did not even expect that because I was in a really rural area, and the women who attended the workshop were from the rural area. And I did not expect them to be able to stand such a boldly like that. But not only that, but also it is spread very quickly. When I thought I was only expecting maybe to reach around 700 because of the coronavirus that broke after that year. But shockingly, other villages are still talking about the same thing. Other villages are learning from the few women who attended that workshop, and that's really makes me so proud because those women, they learned the truth and they stand so boldly. Also, part of that project later on, we were collaborating with another NGO. We were able to teach them about economic and the freedom that economy can bring to a woman, voice and freedom. And the same women, of course, not all of them in the first workshop were part of, but the few that we were able to bring in. And like Dr. Dorothy said, truly economic freedom also has a lot to do with women's freedom in general. And so the few that were able to attend that workshop after, about economic and the freedom it can bring, they are really, really changing a lot. And one of the examples was the last year, the girls of one woman finished class 7, and the husband wanted to sell her for dowry for few cows. But the woman stand, and she was able to take her to the government school, which is free. Only you buy a uniform and the school supplies. And she was able to do that. And to me, the entire community, of course, was talking about her and how she stood up for that one girl. And it made a difference. And I'm just so blown away of how things worked with that one workshop.
Great. So we have 2 minutes, and I want to ask just one final question. So what is one takeaway that you want people listening in right now to take from what they've heard today, or from your experience, or in general about women's rights?
I can go first. Also, one thing I wish people take is that when you see any mistreatment of a woman just because of she's a woman or because just a woman, if you don't keep silent at that very moment, and I want women to hear this, not just anyone, but also women, if you're being treated, being able to really stand out for yourself, being able to say this is not right, and trying to find simply solution that can be used and for your own safety, will such a big, huge difference. No matter how small the incident is, because the smallest can always create like bigger ripples. But also, if you stand for what is right and not keeping a blind eye to any injustice done to women, it will make a huge difference. So anyone who will be involved will make a huge difference worldwide, not just in that person they help.
I would say we have made great strides as women, but the work to be done is still a lot. And women who are living in developed or industrialized countries, you need to listen to this. It's not only women in developing countries who are suffering. Your position is no better than those ones in those countries. If you don't believe me, this week in media, and it's still going on, we had women coming up to accuse the governor of New York. Those women, this didn't happen yesterday or today. It happened long ago. We watched, depending which side you wanted to support, as the members of the royal family from Britain talk. I looked at that, a woman crying out. How long did it take her to cry out? Why wait for an opportunity to do that? Why don't we create a forum for women to be able to express and actually, as Shamata say, talk about the experience as they happen? Even here on campus, how do we know how many women are suffering and they're keeping quiet because they don't know what the repercussion is going to be? And I remember I was like, oh, before we started, I asked, are we safe to get in trouble? I hope I didn't get in trouble.
I want just to wish everybody to be brave, fighting for your rights. And I know what I'm talking about because I spent 12 days in prison in September 2020, fighting for democracy in Belarus. And I'm happy to be here now talking about the situation in my country. And I'm proud to be among such amazing women. So stay brave, stay strong, and we will win.
I think everyone pretty much touched on it, but you see all of us from just how many different countries on this panel today, and there are struggles all around the world, but know that in your struggle, we're all in this together and we're all moving forward, and just support one another as a woman, because women are strong, and when we support one another, we're even stronger. So just support each other.
Yell if you need to yell, just yell.
Yes, thank you so much. Those amazing closing statements. I think they're very definitely beneficial to wrap up. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone who came. If there's anything else that you want to ask, feel free to email student government. We would love to answer your questions more so. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts for fighting for women's rights.
Thank you for the opportunity.
For sure. Hope you all have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.